In this video, we're taking a look at Dungeon Painter Studio 2, the new version of Dungeon Painter Studio recently released on Steam in early beta. We'll go through each of the tools within the program and see what all the different features and options that this application is capable of are. I will put a link in the description below to for how to purchase Dungeon Painter Studio, and if possible put a link for how to install the Dungeon Painter Studio 2 beta. Access to the beta is reliant on the purchase of the first version of Dungeon Painter Studio. Okay, let's do a quick overview of the tools and options within Dungeon Painter Studio 2. On your left here you have your list of tools. Top two tools are your moving selection tool and your rotate tool. We have a glade, plenty, perimeter, texture variant, template, building, floor, room, platform, roof, stair, portal, object, light, and your different shape tools. Your line, polygon, ellipse, and rectangle. On the top you have your file menu where you can open files, save files, do copy and paste, check your list of hotkeys, send a bug report since this application is still in early beta. You can save your window layout. I believe you can adjust the placement of the toolbars in this. We'll check that after we go over them in their default spots. And on the right hand side you have two sets of tools. You have your properties tool, which shows you the properties of whatever you currently have selected in the hierarchy. You have a history tool, which lets you go back several steps through the history of the map as you create it. Down here we have our hierarchy. We have the world, global light, and ground, which are the default parts of the hierarchy when you create a new map. As you can see in this hierarchy, I have a building. It's a bit off the screen, so you can't see it right now, but if we expand it, you can see the different points in the hierarchy and how each thing exists on a level that's within the object above it. Right, next to hierarchy, there's the resources folder, which we're going to skip over and do after we go over the asset browser. So we can see on the ground we have our asset browser showing us all the different art assets we can select for the ground. If you don't see the art asset you like here, this is where the Resources tab comes into play. If we click on Resources tab, we can see our different art asset groups, and which we can expand to select other folders of artwork. And then we can choose those for the texture for that object within the hierarchy. The resources folder will show only textures relevant to the object you have selected within the hierarchy. For example, since we're selected on ground, we are only going to see ground textures. If we wanted to see flooring textures for a room, we would go into a building and go to the shape within a room, and then we would see the different flooring textures. Again, under resources, we have different floor tiles, or for art assets. If we were to go to an object, we can see the different art assets for objects. And again, under resources, there are many different folders worth of art for different objects. Up top here, we can also do a search. So let's search for a chair. And we see various chairs that exist within our art assets. delete that. Go back to Asset Browser. At the bottom of the Asset Browser, there are two options: Open Folder and Rescan. Open Folder will open the folder in your computer where this particular art asset that you have showing on the screen is located. So since we have these knives, we click our Open Folder to open the folder where the art is. If we wanted to add additional art, we could add the files here, and then close this, and click the Rescan button on the right, and the art would pop up. We also have, in the menu object, up here, Step and Half Cell. This adjusts whether placing objects and rooms snaps to the grid, or is free-floating and ignores the grid. Alright, now that we've gone over each of the different tools, let's check and see if we can move these toolbars. Since the window option said save layout up top, it suggests the possibility that we can. So let's grab the title of a toolbar and drag it around and see where it can go. Okay, so we can in fact move tools to various locations and snap them around. As we drag the toolbar title around, it shows us the various places that it can snap to. This is much nicer than Dungeon Painter Studio version 1 in that you can create the layout that best works for your workflow. Let's examine the Glade tool. First, we'll select the Glade option. That will create a Glade object in hierarchy. Then we'll draw some shapes in the Glade. Let's start with a rectangle Glade. Make sure it is checked for additive so that you can actually see the Glade. And click a pattern. We'll select this stone pattern so it's very clearly visible where the Glade is. We can adjust the border of the Glade. We can adjust the opacity of the Glade. We can adjust the shape we drew in the Glade by clicking Move Control Points and readjusting the shape. We can click Convert to Polygon and change the shape entirely using any of these linked points, which can be dragged all around. Let's go back to our Glade options by clicking on the polygon. We can change the texture by simply selecting a texture from the right. Let's stick with the stone pattern so we can see. And if we add another shape to the Glade, we can then move that shape around and see that it combines and melds with the other shape in the Glade. Additionally, if we highlight Glade, we can move the Glade around and all the shapes that are part of that Glade at once. We can adjust the opacity of all of the shapes at once, and adjust the border of all the shapes at once. Even if you move these shapes apart, since they're both part of the Glade, no matter which one you highlight, if you adjust the opacity, it adjusts the opacity or the border of the entire Glade. Let's see what other objects or items can be contained within the Glade. Can we put a building in the Glade? No. The building will exist outside of the Glade as a separate entity. We'll remove the building for now. So if we can't put a building in there, then we also cannot put rooms, ores, or platforms. What we can put in there are objects, or light sources. Interestingly, we can also place portal objects within the Glade However, as there are no visible walls in the glade, the portal does not visibly appear within the glade. Essentially, the glade exists to build rooms that have no walls. Alright, now let's take a look at the Plenty tool. Let's go ahead and click on the Plenty tool to add a Plenty level to the hierarchy. Now let's click a shape. And we'll draw our shape. We can see that we already had these box A art selected. So as you can see, what the Plenty tool does is when you draw a shape there, it fills that shape with the art asset you selected. So you can select different art assets, we can swap between them. Let's go back to the box. This looks a bit similar to a Glade tool, except that it's automatically filled with a bunch of copies of this box. So let's see what else we can do with this Plenty tool. Much like the Glade tool, it has the additive option, so that you can cut other spaces out of the middle. Let's go ahead and add a square to the middle that's not additive. You can see that just cuts the shape out. Let's go ahead and see what else we can do. We can change the interspace. So that's how much space is between each of the objects in the Plenty. Change the vertical offset. So you can see as we change that, the shadows move. You can change the offset spread. It's a little harder to see what's moving there than with the vertical offset, but as you can see, as I move this a little faster, you can see that the shadows are definitely moving to different positions with the offset spread. We can adjust the seed number, which basically affects exactly where within the Plenty the boxes appear and in what position they appear. Additionally, if we want to, for some reason, uncheck the random rotation, all of the objects would appear in the exact same orientation within the Plenty. You can also click Move Control Points to adjust the shape or the size of the shape. We can convert it to a polygon and really play with all different kinds of ways of reshaping the shape. We could separate areas. That grabs the different polygon shapes and puts them into another Plenty parent in the hierarchy. Here I'm going to go ahead and change the art assets for each of the polygons under the Plenty tools to make the next part a bit more clear. You can see when we change the object for this rectangle, nothing happens because this was the non-additive. Go ahead and delete this one. So we go back to here. Let's see what else we can put within our Plenty. First, let's make it a little bit bigger. And let's change the interspace a little bit more so we have some space between them. Again, let's test and see if we can put a building or any parts of a building within the Plenty. I don't think we can. No, we cannot. However, just like with the Glade, we can put objects within the Plenty. We can also put light sources within the Plenty. And that more or less covers the things you can do with the Plenty. Now that we've taken a look at the Plenty tool, let's take a look at the Texture Variant tool. This is actually an extension of the Plenty tool. When we add a texture variant to a Plenty, it lets us select the art asset or texture at the texture variant level instead of at the Punty level. What this allows us to do is add multiple texture variants, and each one can have a different texture selected so that we can have a mixture of different assets here. All of the other settings are the same as the Punty, except that we can set the interspace and offset while highlighting each texture variant along with the Punty parent. Now let's take a look at the platform tool. Let's go ahead and add a platform. We'll draw a shape for our platform and make sure it's additive so we can see the platform. This works very similarly to a room, except it has no walls. It's the same move control points any other shape has. You can adjust the height of the platform, which as you can see adjusts the shadow. And we can adjust the texture for the platform. Let's pick a texture that shows up and contrasts nicely with the floor here. I think this is good enough. We can put objects on the platform. We can put light sources on the platform. So, platform builds a shape, has a ground texture, has height, good for building perhaps fences or border walls around the moat. That covers the platform tool. Alright, now let's take a look at the perimeter tool. Let's go ahead and add a perimeter. Make sure we draw a shape. Check and make sure the shape is additive so we can actually see the room that we drew. As you can see, the perimeter is one level under the building. But in order to have something to look at in the building must have a floor and a room and a shape for the room. Let's go back to the perimeter level and choose what to put around it. How about we grab this chair? Now as you can see, the perimeter works somewhat similar to the Punty tool, except rather than filling one specific shape, it surrounds the building. So let's go ahead and create another room within the building and draw a shape for that room. Make sure it's additive. I'm not quite sure why it is defaulting to not additive. Let's scroll out and see, now that we've added the second room, the perimeter object automatically surrounds both rooms. So as we move this room around, we can see the perimeter is surrounding both rooms and readjusting automatically. A perimeter can also exist within a room. So let's go ahead and highlight this first room here and add another perimeter. As you can see, it filled that room on the interior with the object. Let's go ahead and switch that object to these barrels. Let's see what else we can do with the perimeter. You can adjust the width of the perimeter. You can adjust the margin, which is a little less clear what's happening with the margin. Change the vertical offset, which as you can see adjusts the shadows. Change the offset spread. Again, adjusts the shadows, as you can see when I move this a little faster. Much like the Punty tool, you can adjust the seed, which changes the exact layout of the objects within the space. And you can change the interspace for how far away from each other the objects within the tool are. So again, it works very, very similar to the Plenty tool, except that it's tied to the exterior or interior of a room or building. Now let's look at buildings. Let's go ahead and add a building. A building needs to have at least one floor, and each floor needs to have at least one room. And then each room consists of at least one shape. As you can see, when we add the shape, it automatically creates walls and a floor. So let's go ahead and create a couple shapes for this room. We will create another room with another shape. And we'll create another floor with another room and another shape. Now, let's zoom out a little bit so we can see all our pieces. And let's go back up to the top here and check out our settings. At the building level, we can set underground floors, which you can see as we adjust this, the shadows disappear. And the shadowing of the walls adjusts. The wall outset adjusts the thickness of the walls on the outside of the rooms and buildings. If we adjust the wall perspective option, we can see in the rooms that it gives us a three-dimensional effect where we can see the insides of the walls of the rooms. At the floor level, we can adjust the wall texture or the color of the wall. At the room level, we can adjust whether the room has a ceiling or if the sunlight is shining through. We can adjust the flooring texture, and we can adjust the wall inner offset, which again makes the wall thicker or thinner, but this time instead of pushing out from the building, it pushes into the room. Now, these two shapes that are in the same room, if we take one of these shapes and overlap it with another shape that is in the same room, they will meld together and you will see the wall disappear because the program knows that this is all one room. If you take a shape from another room and overlap it with that room, you'll see that the walls stay intact. So you can visibly see that these two rooms are, in fact, two different rooms in your hierarchy. Now, if we take the room that's in another floor and overlap it, you'll see it covers up this room. That's because these buildings are built from the ground floor up. So this floor is at the bottom, and this floor covers that floor. Even though the floors are lower in the hierarchy, they are higher up in the building structure. We can adjust where the floors are by simply dragging and dropping the floor at the level we want. And now we can see the floor that was on the top is now on the bottom. Additionally, much like the Glade Tool, we can change whether a shape is additive or not additive. So if we uncheck additive, this rectangle is now a cutaway rather than an addition. Alright, now let's talk about the other things you can do within a building. We can put stairs in a building. Add the stairs, draw some stairs, select a texture for the stairs. Let's make these stairs a little less wide. and maybe a little taller. As we can see, when you make the stairs taller, the most visible way of telling it's taller is from the shadows. We'll put some stairs right here. Maybe we'll adjust this room to be a little bit bigger. So I can click at shape, click control points, drag it a little bigger, make sure it has a good texture. As you may have noticed, the flooring texture was kind of missing on my screen before resizing it. This program is in an early beta release, so some bugs are to be expected. Let's get back to the stairs. As you can see, it's a little bit hard to tell that these are stairs, except by the shadow here. But they are, in fact, a stairs object. Let's see what our options here are for a stair object. So obviously we can change the texture of the stairs. We can change the width of the stairs. And we can change the height of the stairs. Let's move on to the next one that we can use within a building, the portal tool. So here, once we select our portal tool, we select which kind of door we want to use for the portal. Let's use this door for now. And then, if we put the portal tool over a part of a wall, we can see we can pick where within the wall we want it. Let's place it right here at the top of the stairs. And let's see what we can do with this portal. Change the art for the portal, adjust the width of the portal. We can also adjust the portal front. While not visible on the map, we can change the shaping of the doorway as the characters would see it on the front of the door. The most notable way to see this on the map is when a light source shines through. So let's go ahead and quickly add a light source in front of this door at the top of the stairs here. And now we can go back to our door or portal object and see as we switch these, you can see the shadow of the light coming through the door, changing shape to match our different selected shapes. Portals can be set to block line of sight or to not block line of sight. As you can see, if you uncheck the block line of sight box, the art for the door disappears, as there would be no physical door to block the character's line of sight. Let's leave this on line of sight so we can see the door at the top of the stairs. The other object, building specific, on the left here is the roof. So let's click roof, and let's put a roof over top of part of this building. So you select roof, you click and drag to create your roof. Let's see what we can do with the roof. We can change the texture of the roof. We can change the color of the roof. As you can see, it's more of a color tint, and not every texture supports the changing of the color. We can change the width of the roof, the height of the roof, and the offset, which, as you can see, changes both the shape of the roof a bit and changes the shadow to match that shape. Right, let's go ahead and cover both light sources and objects. First, we already have a light source on our map from when we were building the building earlier. So let's see what our options with a light source are. We can adjust the range of the light source. We can adjust the vertical offset, how far up or down the light goes. We can adjust how intense the light is, which is essentially how bright or dark the light is. And we can adjust the color of the light. Give ourselves a interesting color light here. Like how that color makes the shadows really stick out. Now let's see what we can do with our objects tool. This is the tool that lets you grab different art assets and place them within rooms or on the map. As you can see, as we place the object within this room, in the hierarchy, they are in this, but when we place the chair outside of the building, that chair showed up at a different spot in the hierarchy of our map. It's not in the room, so if you were to drag it over to the room, it would disappear underneath the room and not be visible, as it is not at the same level in the hierarchy as the other chairs. Let's go back to these other chairs and see what we can do with an object. We can change the texture, which is which object this is. We can change the rotation of that object. We can change the vertical offset, which adjusts the shadows. And we can adjust the scale. Give ourselves a really, really big chair or a really, really tiny chair. We can adjust whether the object casts shadows or not. And then there's the limitless box, which I'll show you what that does. So let's take this object and move it through the wall. Let's scale it up real big so it's very visible that it's all the way through the wall. If we were to uncheck limitless, it would limit the object to existing only within the room and not stick through the walls. Switch back to limitless, and the object can stick through the wall and into other rooms or outside. If we were to select more than one object at a time using a control click, let's select both of these chairs together. Then we could move both chairs together with the move selection tool, or we could rotate them together with the menu up here, or use the rotate tool in the top left hand menu to rotate them. As you can see, the two different rotation options work a little differently. This rotation in the top right hand corner rotates things in place, whereas the rotate in the top left, if you've selected more than one object, will rotate them around a center point. Now if we were to only select one object and use this rotate tool, it would rotate individually on its own axle or center. Alright, now that we have something on our map, let's take a look at the hierarchy lists. When we first create a new map, these top three objects in the hierarchy automatically exist: world, global light, and ground. Let's take a look at each of them and see how they affect the building that we have on the map. So world, we have our grid opacity. So we can see there is a grid over top of everything, but we can make it invisible. We have this height and width, which you can't really see what is changing here very well, except that the scroll bars are moving. Let's move the height really low and move the width really low for a second. And then we'll zoom out with the mouse wheel. As you can see, our building is sitting off the ground now. If we adjust the width, the ground gets wider. Adjust the height, the ground gets taller. This is essentially just changing the base size of the ground for your map. Now let's go down to global light and see what our options are there. Let's zoom a little further into our building so we can see the shadows better. Now, we can adjust the lighting environment. By default, it starts at sunlight. It changes to underground, sunset, moonlight. Back to sunset for now. Or sunlight for now, not sunset. Let's see what these other two options. Sunbeam angle adjusts where in the sky the sun is. Going from a long shadow to the sun directly above. The shadow rotation lets you adjust the direction of the shadow. So using these two options together, along with the appropriate lighting situation, you can adjust the shadow to whatever direction and time of day you need. Additionally, we can click the check or uncheck cast shadow if we don't want the sun to cast a shadow at all. And our third default option hierarchy is the ground. This is where you choose a main texture for your ground and a secondary texture. So for the main texture, let's switch it to this red mud. Zoom out a little bit so you can really see what's going on there. And for the secondary texture, let's use this grass. Now we can adjust the noise scale. As you watch the ground, you can see what happens here. It moves that secondary texture along. It looks almost as if it's scrolling the secondary texture across the ground on the main texture. And then we can adjust the opacity of that secondary texture. So we can have just a barren ground, or some scrub over it, or some very bright, vibrant green grass patches. Alright, let's go over the template tool. Template tool lets you take a map file or JPEG file that you already have saved in the templates folder and paste it onto your screen, and then you can use that template as a guide to draw more maps, or if you already have a pre-made map, you can add that pre-made map into this map using the template tool. Here we can adjust the opacity of the template so that we can use it for tracing. And we can adjust the vertical offset if we're using it as a pre-made map, which would adjust shadows but does not appear to be doing much to this particular template file. And as we've already seen, we can adjust the size of the template by clicking move control points and resizing the template.